Hello, my name is Eva Hahn, and for my literature review, I chose the topic, How Poverty Relates to Child Welfare. The correlation of poverty and how it plays a role in child welfare is explored within this research paper. As noted inside the research, poverty plays a role in the deciding factors of neglect and maltreatment, as well as how the stigma aligns with the role of the child welfare system. Many factors play into how a child may experience poverty, whether that is cohabitating parents, divorced parents, generational poverty, and many more. When facing a poverty crisis, children experience a significant amount of trauma with many side effects. Within this literature review, 10 articles are reviewed explaining the causes of poverty, the trauma experience, the poverty crisis in the United States and other countries, and how it affects the child welfare system. This literature breaks down 10 articles on the effects of poverty and the relation to child welfare. This study brings attention to the needs of the children welfare system and the long-term effects poverty has on individuals. This research supports the idea that lawmakers need to better address the poverty issue among families and support to combat the long-term effects on communities throughout the nation. This research shows the mental health, physical health, and financial situations within families. Article 1. The article discusses how poverty comes with many questions and assumptions, and along with these many conflicting emotions. The government deems people in poverty as individuals who are unable to provide basic needs for themselves, such as food, shelter, and clothing. However, poverty according to the governmental threshold can be different for those who live in an urban area versus those who live in a rural environment. Poverty is arranged in many ways. Types of poverty include situational, generational, absolute, relative, urban, and rural. This article will be useful and is useful for my literature review as it explores the different types of poverty within the United States, specifically situational, relative, and rural poverty. These types of poverty are the most common forms where children are placed from their birth parents and placed into the child welfare system. The information provided by Mr. Jensen goes into depth about the types of poverty and the challenges that come from the poverty crisis these families are in. With this information in mind, lawmakers can have the knowledge needed for their specific communities and be able to create legislation to combat the child welfare system crisis. Article 2. People who experience poverty often are immigrants entering the nation. When children who have two foreign-born parents, being in poverty is more prone to happen. As generations go on, poverty tends not to be as prominent. Socioeconomic inequalities, along with the lines of immigrant generation, race, and ethnicity, suggest such demographic changes may result in greater disparities among recent, more diverse cohorts of children. This article is important for my literature review as it explains the amount of poverty crisis that is faced over decades, even with immigrants to the U.S. The official poverty measure of the supplemental poverty measure both underestimate the poverty line. The article and the research done within this article show that the Hispanic immigrants face a more substantial poverty increase rather than the Asian immigrants. With the information from this article, the lawmakers can gain a better understanding that there are many immigrants such as Hispanic and Asian immigrants that are in poverty and take a toll on the social welfare system. Helping these immigrants would also lower the amount of children that enter the social welfare system, allowing for fewer families to be separated and more individuals helping the economy and not falling into generational poverty. Article 3. Child support can cause poverty in some circumstances where the focus is on the resident parent and not on the non-resident parent within the child support case. Non-marital births rose from 10.7% of births in 1970 to 40.1% in 2015, meaning that separation is more prone to occur in households within today's society. This leaves one parent to raise a child, needing more financial strain, child support being an option for assistance. When multiple children are in splitting household, on occasion, children are split between two parents, causing, in most cases, demand to pay child support to the mother to raise her child or children. This causes the father and the children he has to suffer and fall into a poverty-stricken home. This article goes to show that child support payments can help the receiving families stay above the poverty line at times. However, on the opposite side of the payments, the paying parents tend to struggle more fulfilling the basic needs of the family and children that they provide for. This article shows the substantial increase of non-marital births, which is approximately 4 times the amount it was in 1970. With this increase, more children are suffering in the child welfare system as subsidies and child support payments are being provided to help children from being removed. Article 4. This article discusses the high rates of poverty within children who have belong to single-parent families. This article discusses research done in 4 countries: Australia, Finland, the UK, and Finland. The article compares the effectiveness of child support or child maintenance per the article and its ability to reduce child poverty. This article also brings policy considerations to show how child maintenance funds are a cost-effective tool to recover funds. However, they are no poverty reduction impact. This article is useful and to the extent of the information presented based on the study. Although this information is useful, the information does not pertain to the United States, and due to this factor, it's not entirely useful for this lit review. Lawmakers can review the study, however, to see the main points within this research article. It may lack credibility towards the poverty crisis within the United States and local communities. Article 5. This article is based on research done from the College of William and Mary in Virginia. The research done is a set of polls designed to examine what Americans feel toward the poor and what needs done. With this research, it was found that Americans feel positive about the poor and the fighting for the poor should be a priority. However, the polls showed that living off welfare should not be the way that poverty is resolved. The research within the article was based off of ANES, NORC, GSS, Gallup, Pew, and other polls from the nation. In this article, it shows that Americans are not satisfied with the efforts to help reduce and eliminate poverty. These polls also show that Americans are not content with those who are poverty-stricken receiving welfare benefits as a way to resolve the crisis. With this knowledge from the polls, lawmakers can make a more absolute decision that aligns with America's desires. With a more educated decision, less children could potentially live off of the child welfare system and find a more supporting home when being removed and placed outside of their birth parents' home. Article 6. Poverty itself is not always a deciding factor of child protection services. Oftentimes, it is the byproduct of the poverty that causes the decision to be made for the child protection agencies to step in. Such byproducts being housing disadvantages, substance abuse, and domestic violence problems within the home. Surveys were done to see how the participants would make the decision to remove the children for placement. Many decided based on the facts of the children having worn clothes, acting lethargic from not eating meals, and having issues focusing. In this article, it shows the concerns of the community for children who are suffering from poverty-stricken homes. The byproducts of the poverty-stricken homes tend to be more of an issue than the poverty itself. This article shows the decision-making process of the social workers within the child welfare system and what the community members tend to think as well when looking at the case scenarios. This article and the research within will show lawmakers the decisions beyond and behind the cases and what the community thinks as well concerning these child welfare cases. Article 7. Internationally, it has been recognized that child abuse and neglect has a strong correlation with a family's poverty state. A study by Russian and Bollinger found that a modest increase to a state's minimum wage drastically reduced the amount of child abuse cases. Within 4 studies done in the article, researchers found that the respondents acknowledged poor housing, substance abuse, mental health, unemployment, domestic abuse, and poverty all were issues that correlated with one another. The article also goes into depth on how social workers tend to dismiss poverty being the root cause and look into the byproducts of poverty. This inconsideration for the root cause undermines the amount of poverty that occurs within the U.S. and internationally. This article is important to my literature review as it represents many avenues on how poverty is relative to lawmakers. Lawmakers need to reform the child welfare system and help create more jobs to lower the caseloads and timescales while increasing the budget so social workers can focus more in depth on the root causes of many cases. Article 8. Children who come from families that are not married tend to be more prone to live in poverty. The article goes into depth on families with parents who are not married before and during the recession of 2008. Married couples tend to be more educated and have higher household earnings. The research done within this article is based off of 5 countries, such being United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and Ireland. The study also focuses primarily on marital status and gender of the individual who is the head of the household. The research within the article showed that families who have non-married parents reduce the chance of poverty by income transfers. With the article focusing on information from a large variety of resources over 5 countries, the information becomes a bit harder to validate the conclusion within the literature review. The information from the research is too broad to show the significance to the United States and the poverty experienced from children and the effect it has on the child welfare system. Article 9. The article focuses on how children oftentimes have stress related to the poverty situation. Children who are raised in a poverty-stricken household often have stress and trauma from the violence that occurs, the financial burden, and discrimination. The article states path analysis with a multi-ethnical sample of 164 children aged 6 to 18 revealed that the stress associated with poverty, such as economic strain, family conflict, violence, and trauma, and discrimination, is an important component of the experience of poverty for children. This oftentimes causes developmental issues within the children as they face many battles that they are hurdling and don't have all their needs met. The article also goes into depth on the stress experienced and how many children who live in poverty experience many mental health issues. According to the article, children who live in poverty tend to struggle from DSM-IV symptoms, deviant behaviors, and physical health issues. With the research done in the article from the University of Denver, some of the deviant behaviors found with poverty-stricken children are pregnancy, substance abuse, legal problems, and school dropouts. In this article, it shows the correlation between poverty and the causes of child placement into the child welfare system. The amount of family stress that comes from poverty causes disruptions that lead to the initial placement. Lawmakers can use this information to help make more resources available to those who are in need and cannot afford to provide them for their family. Article 10. This article broadens the spectrum of poverty to a worldwide viewpoint between North America and Europe. The article challenges the definition of poverty and how it is measured differently between countries and an overall standard. The article goes into depth explaining how the poverty line measurement is used and how it is efficient for a worldwide standard. However, the article also challenges the ways a country measures poverty based on resources available and the family style as well. As explained in the article, poverty is judged by a single line and whether the individual is above or below the line, no matter how close one is to the line. The poverty line does not take into account external resources for a person's household income, only by a single individual. My reflections on Article 10 are that it breaks down the measurements of poverty and explains the pros and cons of each system of measurement. The article does a great job on showing the worldwide view of poverty and the comparison between North America and Europe. This comparison and explanation on poverty can be useful for lawmakers making legislation based on the worldview, and with having this understand making a more educated decision. Poverty defined. Within the United States, most Americans see poverty as something that adults suffer from after making bad decisions that led them to such. The poverty-stricken individuals are also mainly seen in larger cities. However, most of us do not know how the poverty-stricken individuals grew up, what their odds of success are because of it, and how they tend to live now. The most common forms of poverty that are seen with children who are placed in the child welfare system are situational poverty and rural poverty. Poverty measured. Child poverty has continued to be a gradual incline within the United States, where it is at an all-time high. Due to such, it continues to be a pressing issue within the economy as well as within governmental policies. Child poverty is oftentimes measured by where the children's family household income lies, so that the material resources available are measured. The government has set a poverty line so that those who do not meet a certain threshold lack the ability to function normally in society. Poverty within family homes. According to this research by Theed and Brooks, people who experience poverty often are immigrants entering the nation. When children who have two foreign-born parents being in poverty is more prone to happen. As generations go on, poverty tends to not be as prominent. Child support can cause poverty in some circumstances where the focus is on the resident parent and not on the non-resident parent within a child support case. Poverty effects. Children oftentimes have stress related to the poverty situation. Children are raised in a poverty-stricken household, often from stress and trauma from the violence that occurs, financial burden, and discrimination. Poverty itself is not always a deciding factor of child protection services. Oftentimes it is the byproduct of the poverty that causes the decision to be made for the child protection services and agencies to step in. Internationally, it has been recognized that children abuse and neglect has a strong correlation within a family's poverty state. The research done within this article proved the thesis of the literature review. Children poverty needs to be addressed by lawmakers to combat the amount of children who end up in the child welfare system and have adverse effects. Through this process of research, I have learned the depths of social issues. The depth of social issues, such as understanding of the importance social issues and how society works as a whole. This being how social issues such as poverty affects lawmakers' decisions and how it plays into the state's budget. Effects on poverty and how it plays a role in the government, a child's home environment, and the mental, emotional, and physical effects and how it has on those who face poverty, especially in children. And lastly, I learned how underlying issues can be misconceived. This mainly happens in the child welfare system by social workers and case managers. As they make decisions for the children's welfare, they focus on the deviant behaviors and the effects that poverty has within a home rather than focusing on the poverty itself.